A modern man grows up surrounded by images, desire, and endless stimulation, believing that pleasure is power and indulgence is freedom. Yet every indulgence trains the mind to obey impulse rather than command it, and over time, this obedience becomes weakness. Disguised as strength, the body feels alive temporarily, but the mind fragments. The nervous system adapts to distraction and focus, weakens, leaving ambition unresolved. Energy dissipates and life drifts without direction, purpose, or clarity. Lust feels powerful in the moment because it floods the body with sensation and hijacks attention, offering escape from effort, but the cost is invisible. Every release drains the system of focus, vitality, and mental clarity, leaving the man temporarily calm and long-term empty and fragmented. He saces relief, repeatedly unaware that each indulgence strengthens reaction and erodes self-governance, slowly teaching the nervous system that desire always decides, and discipline becomes foreign, while ambition slips quietly out of reach. Sex, when uncontrolled, becomes consumption, and consumption trains the mind to seek relief instead of mastery. The man enslaved to desire loses the ability to delay gratification, and every indulgence replaces effort with fantasy over time. This cycle erodes patience, tolerance, and persistence. Creating a foundation of weakness, retention interrupts this flow by forcing energy inward, allowing the body to rebuild, the nervous system to stabilize, the mind to sharpen cognition, and the man to regain control over himself and his environment. The world quietly rewards men who can sit with desire without obeying it, because restraint builds internal authority, and authority expresses itself through calm, present, stable decisions and long-term thinking, while indulgence fragments attention and reduces risk tolerance. A man who preserves his energy naturally attracts influence, respect, and opportunity, and he does so without chasing validation, because presence and coherence communicate power more effectively than words or status, and energy, once contained, multiplies in all areas of life. Lust does not destroy men instantly, it erodes them slowly by replacing ambition with fantasy and effort with stimulation. And when imagination is satisfied prematurely, action loses urgency and life begins drifting. The nervous system adapts to low energy cycles, attention fragments, and emotional stability decreases, while internal authority is replaced by need and desire. Retention reverses this by preserving energy internally, amplifying focus, patience, and creativity, and over time, momentum compounds, quietly producing clarity, consistency, and influence that appear effortless to everyone around him. Semen retention enters this equation not as denial but as interruption, because for the first time, the body is forced to hold energy rather than leak it in. That holding pressure accumulates pressure. When directed, becomes power. Mental clarity increases emotional stability, strengthens in physical endurance, improves. The man notices subtle changes in posture, gaze, voice, and movement that are invisible to others, yet communicate authority effortlessly, because energy once wasted is now converted into sustained presence and internal fuel for creation and execution. When seed is wasted repeatedly, the body remains in recovery mode, never fully building momentum. The nervous system adapts to lower thresholds for energy, and the mind accepts mediocrity as normal. Fatigue becomes habitual, and ambition is slowly replaced by distraction and escape. Retention stops this loss by converting potential into usable energy that fuels strategy, execution, and resilience. The man begins noticing consistent improvement in focus, decision-making, and productivity, while previously habitual weakness dissolves under the weight of preserved energy. Retention reverses distraction by creating silence inside the mind, and silence exposes truth, forcing responsibility and clarity. The man learns that control is not restriction, but alignment, and restraint is not weakness, but power. Energy, once contained, is available to be directed into work, creativity, leadership, and personal mastery. Outcomes begin to compound. Physical strength increases, mental acuity improves, and relationships stabilize because coherence generated internally reflects externally, producing authority that is both natural and undeniable across all aspects of life. Sexual energy is creative energy, and when constantly discharged, it cannot rise into thought leadership or execution. Lust consumes focus and energy, producing fatigue, instability, and distraction. Retention redirects this same force internally, amplifying cognitive function, problem solving, and strategic thinking. Over time, the man notices results that were previously impossible appear attainable because the energy that once dissipated now fuels deliberate action, momentum, consistency, and magnetic presence in personal, professional, and social spheres. A man enslaved to lust constantly reacts to environment stimuli, while a man who retains becomes the environment others react to, because retained energy produces calm, presence, deliberate action, and internal authority over weeks, months, and years. The nervous system adapts to higher baselines of focus and patience, creating resilience, persistence, and magnetism. Attraction, respect, and opportunity all flow naturally toward a man who conserves energy, while indulgence dissipates it, producing weakness invisibly and consistently until it controls the life of the man who yields. The man realizes that repeated indulgence trains weakness because the nervous system adapts to instant gratification and the brain interprets release as reward while effort is postponed. Repeated release creates passivity, lowers risk tolerance, and erodes discipline. Retention interrupts this cycle by redirecting energy into creation and growth, producing mental resilience, physical endurance, and emotional stability over time. Repeated restraint builds identity, confidence, and authority, while formerly wasted energy compounds into momentum and influence that shape life outcomes without external validation or effort. Retention transforms discomfort into signal rather than threat, because when desire arises, the man no longer escapes. He observes tension, channels it into work, training, or strategy. Every act of restraint reinforces neural pathways and strengthens self-trust. Repeated practice builds confidence, patience, and clarity. Energy once wasted now fuels purpose, vision, and execution, producing tangible results, momentum, and influence, silently visible to all, because internal coherence communicates authority and power far more effectively than words, gestures, or superficial performance ever could. He notices that men enslaved to lust constantly chase relief, while men who retain energy act deliberately because retention strengthens the ability to delay gratification, redirect impulses, and transform tension into action over weeks and months. This repeated practice rewires the brain toward sustained purpose, resilience, and high performance, producing consistent achievement, focus, and momentum, while lust dissipates energy, attention, and willpower, leaving the man reactive, fragmented, and increasingly disconnected from his long-term goals, ambitions, and potential. Semen retention sharpens creativity, focus, and mental acuity, because energy that would have dissipated through indulgence is now available for synthesis, strategy, and execution over time. The mind consolidates ideas, connects concepts, and implements plans with precision, producing outcomes. Previously unattainable lust consumes attention, retention protects it, and over time, preserved energy becomes a superpower as projects, initiatives, and personal growth compound. Naturally, the man becomes an architect of his life rather than a reactor to circumstance. Energy flows into creation rather than escape. The man sees clearly that sex without discipline enslaves because it trains the nervous system to obey desire instead of reason. Every indulgence reduces focus, patience, and persistence, creating a cycle where impulse dominates and growth stalls. Retention stops this leakage by forcing energy inward, where it fuels clarity, thought endurance, and self-command. Over time, momentum builds naturally, decisions sharpen, and confidence resets, creating a man who attracts opportunity, influence, and respect effortlessly without chasing validation externally or needing approval. He begins understanding that attraction follows energy, not effort, because people sense presence and coherence long before words or status. A man who retains his sexual force radiates calm authority and confidence that draws attention naturally, while lust-driven men radiate need and desperation. The difference compounds over time. Attraction becomes effortless and magnetic because energy, once contained, transforms into influence that shapes environment, circumstances, and relationships. The man notices subtle social shifts that reward presence, consistency, and authority that cannot be faked. Retention builds discipline because resisting habitual release trains self-control, patience, and delayed gratification, and when practiced consistently, the mind rewires toward long-term reward over instant pleasure. The nervous system stabilizes, physical strength and stamina increase, and emotional regulation improves. Each act of restraint compounds into self-trust and confidence, producing visible results across work, relationships, health, and reputation. The man begins to act from internal authority, not external demand, and influence follows silently because consistency commands respect. The man realizes that sexual energy preserved transforms into momentum because every act of restraint directs life force into creation rather than release, and over weeks, months, and years. This momentum manifests as consistent growth, physical strength, mental acuity, emotional stability, and social influence. Lust dissipates energy, leaving the man fragmented, and reactive retention multiplies it, producing magnetic presence and effortless authority. The difference is measurable, internally through focus, externally through results, and visible to all who interact with him. He understands that distraction is the enemy of growth, because men who chase pleasure outsource energy to external stimuli. while men who retain redirect it inward, the result is compounding improvement in cognition, discipline, creativity, and emotional resilience every day and every choice. Sexual energy, preserved fuels, achievement, and influence, while uncontrolled lust produces fatigue, fragmentation, and decay, undermining potential quietly and relentlessly. He notices that men enslaved to lust constantly seek immediate relief, while men who retain energy act with deliberation. Because retention strengthens the ability to delay gratification and redirect impulses into productive work, learning, or creative output. Repeated practice rewires the brain toward long-term reward and resilience, producing consistent achievement, focus, and clarity, while indulgence creates distraction, fatigue, and inconsistency over time. The man realizes that mastery of sexual energy is mastery of attention. Attention fuels success, influence, and internal authority naturally. Retention teaches him that every choice matters because yielding to temptation trains weakness, while resisting builds identity, authority, and confidence. Each moment of control compounds into greater clarity, patience, and capability. The nervous system adapts to higher baselines of self-command over weeks and months, producing men who no longer react impulsively to desire, challenge, or distraction. Instead, they move intentionally and consistently, influencing outcomes naturally, without effort, while others remain trapped in cycles of indulgence, energy leakage, and unconscious weakness. The man understands that sexual energy is creative energy because desire and vitality drive intensity, thought, imagination, and execution when preserved consciously. Amplifies problem-solving vision and strategic action, whereas when wasted through habitual release, it dissipates, leaving the mind foggy. Motivation, unstable in confidence, weak retention redirects this force internally, producing mental clarity, emotional balance, and physical readiness, simultaneously creating a feedback loop where energy conservation multiplies output, influence, and magnetic presence across work, social, and personal life. He sees clearly that distraction is the subtle enemy of growth, because men who chase pleasure outsource energy to external stimuli, while men who retain redirect it inward, producing compounding improvement in discipline, focus, creativity, and resilience over time. Preserved energy fuels leadership, execution, and influence, while uncontrolled lust erodes attention, willpower, and internal coherence, producing weakness invisibly until it dominates the life of the man who yields to desire. Retention strengthens mental resilience because repeated restraint teaches the nervous system to tolerate discomfort, delay gratification, and act intentionally. Each act compounds into focus, clarity, and strategic thinking over time. The man notices improved problem-solving, decision-making, and persistence. Energy, once wasted, is now a consistent resource, building internal authority and influence across relationships, work, and personal growth, while indulgence trains passivity, distraction, and emotional instability, weakening every effort silently and gradually. Semen retention builds presence, because energy once dissipated through indulgence now circulates internally, stabilizing posture, voice, and gaze, naturally producing influence and magnetism without effort. Lust-driven men radiate need and inconsistency, while retained energy produces calm confidence, attraction, and authority. Effortlessly, the difference is subtle at first, but compounds over weeks and months as internal energy accumulates into visible impact across professional, social, and personal arenas, producing respect and opportunity silently. The man notices that indulgence always produces urgency, while retention produces patience, because energy that is constantly discharged creates agitation and impulsivity, whereas energy preserved produces stability, focus, and foresight. Repeated restraint recalibrates the nervous system for higher thresholds of self-control, patience, and decision-making, creating a foundation where long-term goals are pursued efficiently and deliberately, while impulsive men remain trapped in cycles of distraction, exhaustion, and low performance. He realizes that attraction follows energy and not effort, because people unconsciously sense coherence, focus, and internal authority before words or status. A man who conserves his sexual energy radiates calm confidence and magnetic presence naturally, while those enslaved to desire appear anxious and needy. Over time, energy once preserved compounds into influence, opportunity, and respect effortlessly, transforming social dynamics and producing outcomes it would be impossible for men whose nervous systems are hijacked by lust and impulse. Retention produces deliberate momentum because every act of restraint directs energy toward creation rather than escape. Over time, momentum manifests as consistent achievement, physical endurance, mental acuity, and emotional stability. The man notices that projects advance faster, decisions become sharper, and relationships deepen naturally, while indulgence dissipates energy, leaving the man fragmented, reactive, and unable to sustain long-term progress, silently undermining his potential. The man understands now that repeated indulgence trains weakness not because it is immoral but because it conditions the nervous system to obey desire rather than command it. Each release lowers focus, patience, and resilience, while creating passivity, retention, interrupts. This pattern by redirecting energy inward, producing mental clarity, emotional stability, and physical readiness over weeks and months. Repeated practice compounds, internally producing consistent achievement, influence, and self-authority, while those enslaved to lust remain reactive, exhausted, and fragmented. He notices that sexual energy once preserved amplifies mental acuity. Because clarity emerges from undissipated vitality, focus intensifies and cognitive processing accelerates. Repeated restraint allows complex problem-solving, strategic planning, and creative synthesis, while indulgence depletes energy in fragments. Attention-producing, fatigue, confusion, and indecision. The man sees clearly that mastery of his energy multiplies output, influence, and presence effortlessly across work, relationships, and personal development, while habitual release silently erodes his potential and diminishes his impact over time. Retention transforms discomfort into signal rather than threat, because when desire arises, the man no longer flees. He channels tension into productive action. Every act of restraint strengthens self-trust, mental resilience, and patience. Repeated practice produces consistent focus and momentum energy. Once wasted now fuels strategy, execution, and influence across professional and personal life. The man begins to act from internal authority rather than external validation, producing magnetic presence and effortless respect, while indulgence trains dependency, distraction, and weakness invisibly. He understands that distraction is the quiet enemy of achievement, because men who chase pleasure outsource energy to external stimuli, while men who retain redirect it inward, producing compounding improvement in focus, discipline, cognition, and emotional control over time. Preserved energy fuels consistent achievement while indulgence erodes attention, willpower, and self-command, silently weakening potential energy once preserved. Multiplies impact and creates momentum that cannot be faked, while habitual indulgence produces fragmentation, exhaustion, and failure. Without visible alarm, the man realizes that semen retention strengthens presence, because energy once dissipated through indulgence now circulates, internally stabilizing posture, gaze, and voice. Naturally producing confidence and authority effortlessly lust-driven men radiate. Need inconsistency and agitation while retained energy produces. Magnetic.com presence over weeks and months compounded preserved. Energy amplifies influence, opportunity, and respect in professional, social, and personal spheres, silently reshaping outcomes and relationships, while habitual indulgence reduces potential and obstructs progress without obvious notice. He notices that indulgence produces urgency, agitation, and restlessness, while retention produces patience, stability, and foresight. Repeated restraint recalibrates the nervous system to tolerate discomfort, delay gratification, and act with intention, producing internal authority. Momentum and efficiency over weeks and months, long-term goals become achievable and deliberate, while impulsive men remain trapped in cycles of fatigue, distraction, and low-performance energy. Once preserved compounds, internally producing consistent achievement, influence, and magnetic presence across all aspects of life, effortlessly. Retention teaches him that attraction follows energy, not effort, because people unconsciously sense coherence, presence, and internal authority before words or status. A man who preserves sexual energy radiates calm confidence effortlessly, while men enslaved to desire appear anxious, needy, and reactive. Over time, energy once retained compounds into influence, opportunity, and respect, effortlessly transforming social dynamics, relationships, and outcomes, while habitual indulgence fragments energy, focus, and diminishes authority silently over time. The man sees clearly that sexual energy is creative energy, because desire drives focus, vitality, and execution when preserved consciously. Energy amplifies problem-solving, vision, and leadership capacity. Repeated restraint allows synthesis and strategic planning, producing results previously impossible. Indulgence dissipates energy, leaving the mind foggy, motivation unstable, and confidence. Weak retention multiplies energy, internally producing mental clarity, emotional balance, physical readiness, and magnetic presence, silently compounding achievement, influence, and mastery over weeks and months. He realizes that distraction is subtle but powerful, because men enslaved to lust constantly outsourced energy to external stimuli, while men who retain redirect it inward, producing compounded improvement in focus, discipline, creativity, and resilience over time. Preserved energy fuels leadership, execution, influence, and strategic advantage, while uncontrolled indulgence silently erodes cognition, attention, emotional stability, and potential, leaving the man reactive, fragmented, and ineffective. Across all domains, if this video gave you real value, tap the thanks button. Your support helps me keep creating deeper content like this. Every thanks is a spark that keeps this mission alive. Your support means more than you know.